ever-changing and unforgiving, we find our skilled naturalists of cybersecurity, detection engineers. Today, on Atomics on a Friday, join Jamie Williams, Nasreddine Bencherchali, Jose Hernandez, alongside your steadfast co-hosts Paul Michaud and Michael Hug, as they guide us through the intricate ecosystems of data source diversity. In this episode, we delve into the diversity of data sources, the adaptive strategies of detection engineering, and gaze into the future of cybersecurity. A tale of resilience, innovation, and the unyielding pursuit of security. Join us as we shed light on the untold stories of detection engineering only on Atomics on a Friday. In the vast digital wilderness, a realm...
Howdy! Welcome to Atomics on a Friday. I hope you enjoyed our new intro. We'll get a new one every week now. Our intern's on it. Unfortunately, Paul will not be here today, and so I'm going to bring our other co-host in. And I know, who would have thought we had three, because the show is just growing like crazy lately.
So, howdy. Hey.
Hey, Nas, welcome back.
What's up? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm a regular now.
I know. I know. We're just going to sign you on at this point.
Yep.
I wore my Paolo shirt in memoriam of Paul, so if anybody forgets that he's here, I wore this just for him. So,
yeah, not sponsored, hashtag.
Yes, hashtag not sponsored. Yeah, welcome to Purple Madness. We try to do this. Well, this is our second time. This is our second Purple Madness now. Last year we had a good lineup. This year, pretty similar. The cool thing about Purple Madness is that, what's the next slide? The idea is that bringing in different backgrounds, whether related to purple teaming, CTI, threat research, detection engineering, just different perspectives, and we throw it together. And this month is just jam-packed because we're trying to like stack in all kinds of cool content. And so this week is Jamie, Nas, and Jose, which I'll bring them out of their intermedium purgatory.
Welcome to the light. Yeah.
Yes.
Also,
Welcome.
can we like stop and talk about that intro? Because like it had everything. Like I'm a weirdo who dances in elevators. I'm like, yeah, this music's awesome. And like it was building up, and then it felt kind of like Chat GPT like, but like the voiceover was just like chef
Perfect.
10 out of 10. Yeah, no notes. That intern,
yes,
crushing it.
Yeah, I know. Our intern is on par, top tier. We only have the best around here.
Yeah.
I mean, how was he able to contract? That's the voice of David Attenborough?
It was like
I can't say his last name. I'm gonna murder it.
Yeah, David Attenborough. Yeah, Attenborough.
Yeah, British, right? He's British.
He's British. Yeah.
That intern has connections, man.
All the connections. Yep. Not even to the level of Paul connections. Like it's pretty solid connections.
Oh man, that was a pretty cool intro, Mike.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, there will be more over the month, so it's gonna get more intense. But yeah, so next week our third co-host will be back again, and Nas will talk about detection engineering, ripping apart threat reports, kind of how the whole smash and grab goes. Which is a very good method. I recommend it. And then we have
yeah, I love it.
Yes. Then we have Harrison coming back. You may remember Harrison from Such Atomics on a Friday last year, Purple Madness. This time it's gonna be a little different. I think he's gonna spin it with some AI and CTI mix, which will be pretty cool. Andrew will be back. He was here earlier in the week. He'll be back at the end of the month. And then Andrew, I think is going to go into, I think it's Active Directory, Dackles, Sackles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yep. So I think that one's going to be pretty slick. And then Anton will go into purple teaming with Vector and Kubernetes, which I don't know enough about. I think it'll be really cool to see live.
Yep.
Yep.
It's really
That's that.
terrifying when your adversaries know more about your systems than you do. That's Kubernetes scares me in that exact way. It's like, oh no,
Yeah.
we have them. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
No one knows.
It's like when that business group is like, we're going to go deploy on Amazon. It's like the first major cloud initiative, and IT doesn't know about it. Security doesn't know about it, but that engineering team is like, we're just going to go. And then you catch wind of it and you're like, wait a minute, like you're doing AWS. You're doing AWS. And
yeah, was it meantime to read the docs?
And then this may have happened when I was working in a large org. Then they come to you and they're like, here's our paperwork with IT that we'd like to request to have this be PCI compliant. Oh, by the way, we're already processing payments, so we're okay with that.
You retroactively timestamp this is like 3 months ago. Thank you very much. By the end of tomorrow.
You're great auditors, right? I think you guys are cool with us.
Oh, we got bearded. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I went back in time. This was your prior beard. Yes. And Jose, we didn't have a good one of you, so I just took your other one.
I like it. I'm bearded. Sign me up. Schaefer, but now I'm bearded. Never mind.
Yes. Yeah, probably the quickest intros. Michael Haig, I'll be your host today without Paul, who's the other host. And what can I say? Welcome to Atomics on a Friday. You might remember me for such projects as Living Off the Land Drivers and Atomic Red Team. Paul would say, don't forget all the other projects Mike does. And yeah,
I would say that.
Yes, thanks.
Don't forget them, yeah.
Well, go ahead, Nas.
I go next, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Nas, threat researcher at Nextron, Sigma enthusiast, and I don't have as many projects as Mike. Yes. Take it away, Jamie, sorry.
Okay. Jamie, I definitely don't have as many projects as many of you, but I lead technique development for Attack Enterprise. So basically all that really means is read a lot of reports and try to summarize it in like a sentence or two. Really fun there. And then on the side, I do a bunch of like adversary relation stuff. So like big ones were attack evals. So I got brought into that as like hey, you like doing red team stuff, and then somehow I ended up doing like results. And that's kind of how I learned anything about blue teaming. And then more recently, like micro emulations, which was more like, hey, building emulation plans is like honestly kind of terrible. A lot of work, especially working with people who are trying to get other people to use them, kind of a nightmare. So how to make that easier, but still a little bit threat informed. That's probably more than you care about. So I'm gonna pass it off to Jose.
I definitely don't have as many projects as Mike, for sure. Probably I don't know, just keep me around for some reason. I just showed up and I was kidding. No. I don't know. Intro. I love fighting evil, defending against evil. There's a lot of that in the internet, so I'm glad we're out here. And I like building cool stuff. So clearly, Mike, Nas, and Jamie, you guys do too. So
Speaking of cool stuff, what's the octopus art? That's pretty sweet.
That is display. I don't know that.
Display.
Cool.
Nice.
Very cool, especially yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, huge. I love diving. I've seen a bunch diving. Well, not a bunch, about 3 of them. Cubans exaggerate, but I don't know. I love them. They're awesome animals, and this is a display, so it's like actually like a metal thing. I highly recommend them.
Yeah.
Find the link. I drop it. Yeah.
Yeah, the people are asking. So
yeah, office art, man. That's like critical, right?
Yes. Well,
Throw in Helldivers noob, Jose.
Well, you know, can't go diving without
Yes.
help divers, right?
I was waiting for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
He was hesitating. Yeah.
We need
Yes.
a group. We need to set up a group and just get together and like smash bugs. If you like Starship Troopers, I'm totally gonna do a sales pitch, right? Sales pitch. If you like Starship Troopers, if you like Terminator, and you like video games, probably get Helldivers. Hit up Nas and I.
Let's spread democracy.
Democracy, freedom, right? And maybe a GoFundMe for Nas so we can get the game so we can go play it together. Submit sick donations, please, sir, ma'am. Let me place the display thing.
Yeah.
By the way, display has the coolest highly honestly highly recommend. It has the coolest wall art, and it's all metal. You just literally paste it on the wall. Yeah. Like you just paste a magnet, and it just the whole thing is metal, so it just magnetizes it onto the wall. Super easy to take off and on. All right. Second sales pitch of the day. I'll be quiet now.
Boy,
I know, right? Rough.
Getting those sales quotas. Here.
Billy Mays down here.
Trying to gather all these sponsors, right? Display, wink, wink. Hashtag Atomics on a Friday, get 20% off, right?
Oh my God.
Only in March.
Only in March Madness, right?
Yes. Speaking of percentages off, if you were here a week or two ago for Anton, he still has his course discount going for only for Atomic on a Friday listeners and watchers. So only if you're here right now, this is it. I'm calling it. Anton's gonna cut that % off here very quickly after this AF. So just heads up. Go check it out. Constructingdefense.com. Yes.
I love a good Easter egg. I love that it's right in the middle. You had to make it 12 and a half minutes.
Yeah, so I was hang on. Let's take a step back. We got to talk about this.
Let's vamp a little bit and kind of make it, weed out the non-committed.
Yes. Exactly that. All right. Okay. Paul's not here to keep us on track. This is what's going to happen. It's his fault. He's probably listening. Probably not.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you, Jose. Yep, got it out there. I'll drop the constructing defense link there too. Yeah. So things start happening on the Twitterverse, and Nas drops this tweet about how writing detections, as a detection in your writing detections for a product, the reality is you have to write them for multiple sources, and it goes on. And then the thread just goes, and then it's we need a whole show on this. And so, Nas, why don't you break it down? What prompted this tweet?
As many tweets, it was bait. No, it was. It wasn't bait. It wasn't bait. I was frustrated, and it got me thinking into this idea of different log sources, because many people mentioned in the tweet, you could use normalization and these sometimes theoretical ideas that maybe Jose will speak about later. But the idea is that when we write detection sometimes is that we look at the threat and we imagine a log source in our head, process creation. Okay, I see around DLL, it's process creation, fine. I see this file, it's file event. But these are concepts of logs because there exists different aspects of the same log. For example, the security log 4688, it's process creation, and ETW kernel process event ID1 is process creation. And if you have a driver, you can hook the kernel to be sent, when a process is getting created, you get certain events, etc., etc. And it depends on your perspective sometimes. When you're writing a detection, many people, this is all theoretical, of course, but once you go down to writing detection, you're actually using a tool. So, and that tool is providing you with a data source. And that data source, sometimes it's called process creation, but behind the scene, they probably are collecting that ETW, or they are using a driver, or they could be telling you enable group policy to enable the command line and 4688. And these data sources comes with different levels of enrichment. A typical example is the parent image in Sysmon. doesn't exist in like the 4688, and the event ID one in kernel process doesn't have certain information. If you take, for example, image load, it doesn't have signing information, even though it tells you image load. Like many people think that the event ID 7 from Sysmon, the signing information is an enrichment that is provided from Sysmon by reading the binary. Technically, I think, but it is an enrichment. It is an enrichment. I don't quote me on that, but it is an enrichment because it doesn't exist on event ID 7. But the point stays right. Okay, which is you need to take these into account if you're writing for multiple sources. And it becomes a very hard problem because many people can consider, I'm duplicating the detection, or I'm doing that, or I'm doing this. So that was the whole shtick behind the suite. And it's like, especially in the Sigma world, because we write in log sources, abstract log sources, and then people translate it later. So it becomes more relevant in that sense. But that was the general idea, I would say.
And I think just to add to that, I think from even just a macro view of that exact same problem, it also becomes an issue when you start talking about like correlation, where exactly like you said, like you might build some slick logic that's like, oh, if we get this piece of data from a process creation or from a file event, we can correlate with this. And you're like, oh crap, like, well, this implementation of said, I love, like you said, the abstraction, like, hey, this implementation of process creation or command logging does not have that. So this entire like workflow and chain kind of falls apart because we don't have it. Or there's some little nuance of like, oh, like, well, it actually has another field that's useful, but I didn't prepare for that. So now I have this like huge mess. And I think that's one of the big things that we've, even with like attack evals, we tried to like play with, like on paper, we didn't rank and score. In our heads, we're like, if we can figure out how to actually rank and score this crap, I would love to. I just can't. I think the example I always use to like talk to people was like Windows like persistence, like register like a run key or something. And you're like, how would you detect that? Well, within each, like you said, within each like data event, you can probably rank them versus like auto runs versus like a live query, all that, like pros and cons of each. But then you actually think about like, what does detection of that actually mean? It's probably, I'm glad there's a threat hunter in the room. Like it's probably that in itself is kind of useless. Like you need a lot of correlation because there's like, when I think detection, I think cause and effect. Like the data sitting in the registry is the effect. Like, hey, I see a run key, I see it name something, I see the value and whatever kind of crap the adversary put in there. But like without the cause, like I don't really know, I don't have the smoking gun. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what else that process did. I don't know if it's connected to a C2. I don't know if they had a certain user account breached, all that crap, whatever. And I think like you can't really say like one's better than the other, but you can kind of start to, as you rank them like totally, like top to bottom, like, hey, I can correlate this to this and this to this, and it's good or bad or crap. But like each individual part is exactly as I said, it's just a part. It's not in itself very valuable. And I think that's why generally like trying to rank and score individual detections is a little bit, hot take, kind of stupid. Because it's like, okay, like unless I actually can like figure out what's the bigger meaning making from like that one event or that one data type, like without that context, you're just like, oh, cool, that's visibility. And like, and I think that's where, you know, I'm going to end this in a second. Like you start to think about even looking at your list here, like cost, where it's like, oh, cool. Like I'm looking at those and like some of those are, I'm thinking about like small, medium business. I'm like, yeah, we can go and talk about that stuff all day and we can get that working. Some of those I'm like, no, like I'm not even going to bring it up because it's just, again, it's too complex and too much of a, if you have a badass engineer on hand, they're going to own this. If you don't, I'm not even, it's like dangling something out of your reach. Like why, I'm not going to, it almost feels mean to bring that up. Not in like a patronizing way, but like a, I don't, let's do what you can actually do very, very, very well. And then worry about like the fancy, you know, wizardry that could maybe take you to the next level. I don't know if that made any sense, but it's frustrating. And like, I wish there was a way to like make this easier because like a lot of times we'll have these conversations and people were just like, what the hell are you talking about? Or nod. But I feel like those two groups are so separate. Like, I think we need to really like on us, close that gap and say, how can we make more people understand not how to save the world, but at least appreciate what's really, really happening.
Okay.
I have so much history with this specific.
I was waiting for it.
So many
Yes.
feelings with this. Like, no,
Take
like,
us-
like
Let's go
honestly,
diving.
yeah, like what do I start with this? Like, if I had $1 for every time a Splunk customer had to convert detection that we ship as data models to raw, I think we would probably all of us would be driving a boat right now. Like all of us, like you too, Jamie, you too, like all of us, like I at the end of the day, I mean, so again, talk about history. I about 6-7 years ago, we set out to write a detection across multiple cloud providers, right?
Yeah.
And we built the data model. Splunk has this concept of data models, right? Exactly for this, right? Like I'm going to normalize data, put it in a common format that I control, and then I'm going to query it. And you know, I'm going to admit here, I'm the first one who jumped in a webinar. Is like, oh, we did it. We were able to write a query that works across Azure, GCP, and AWS. And I can tell you that like that query was duct tape and bubblegum through death. I don't think I will ever run it in production. And I'm admit it. Like, go look at the webinar, right? Like Splunk cloud data model. And like 5-6 years later, I can tell you that it's been, I think, a bit of a waste of time for it, specifically detection engineers. I think that normalization becomes super important when you're doing ML use cases, but you already know the use case, where us, detection engineers, we don't know what we're going to dive into. We just need something to alert. And we need to know that it's going to work, right? I can't depend on data being normalized correctly and parsed correctly from whomever, the downstream provider is, because otherwise, you don't know if that's going to work. And I think, Nas, to your point about Sigma, I'm sure like folks trying to operationalize that have to do a ton of like, okay, I got to modify this query to get it to work in my environment, right? And people do it with Splunk queries too, right? So first off, this is a hard problem. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze after years and years. I can tell you, like, like the argument is always like, oh, write the argument is always here is like, do you rather write, for example, with EDR, right? Do you rather write one EDR detection that works across all EDRs, or do you, or right, by normalizing the data, right? That's the assumption, right?
Yep.
Or would you rather write a detection per EDR? And right, like, so take again sample. Do you rather write one query that's normalized data from Sysmon, CrowdStrike, and Carbon Black, just to say some examples? So you write one query against that normalized data, or you rather write 3 different queries, right, for the same detection. And I can tell you from experience so far, the whole dream of I'm going to write one query across 3 sounds great on paper, does not work in practice. Never. I mean, listen, I can be wrong, but like in my experience, never seen it work. And I think, Jamie, you mentioned what can we do about this? I think as an industry, we've been trying to do something for years about this, right? We had Ceph, remember, a common event format, right? Even predating that, we had like common configurations, like the Apache common log format for like web logs and like WAFs and stuff like that. That actually, yeah, it wasn't terrible, right? But Elastic rolled out a schema. We rolled out data models, which is a whole another schema. So like, I think as an industry, we've been trying to exactly like I think everybody has a schema at this point, which is great, but it doesn't really help us write. Again, going back to the core problem, can I write a query that works like against your schema, that works against multiple vendors, and without tweaking it, right? It just works out of the box. I copy and paste, boom, ran. Life is good. I don't have to touch this thing. No, that doesn't work. like my experience so far, right? And I think that's my rant. That's my rant. Like, and the amount of effort we spend on the problem versus just let's just write more detection at this point. Like, it's just skip this entire problem. I don't think juice is worth a squeeze.
I think that the fact that you came to that realization and have that webinar to point to, like, makes the research worth it. You're like, oh, cool. Like, I can authoritatively say that it's not worth it. And what's the whole thing? Like, fail fast and learn. That's awesome. But the funny thing is, I'm kind of want to put Nas on the hot seat here. Like, you mentioned there's not like a common, like, I feel like Sigma is the common one. It's just like exactly as you said. It's like it's not abstract. Like we look at like, oh, I understand exactly what all the syntax means, and I can translate that in my head. The problem is it's exactly like your tweet we're staring at here. It doesn't go down to the sensors. And I think that's the issue, is like there is the collection versus the analysis, like delta is still there. But I also like don't know if you could go, we did the same thing with attack, like we did our data components and stuff. Like you can't go to hardware and like, you know, actual like sensor developers and like, hey, can you normalize this huge expensive thing that's deployed all over the world? Can you reconfigure it to kind of play nicely with like this schema? Like that's, it almost feels like the IPv6, IPv4 problem. We're like, okay, we're dealt the hand that exists. So
You know,
what do we do?
That's an interesting problem, because in Sigma specifically, because it tries to solve this, and there is this blog we put out on the Sigma blog, which is called Beyond All Taxonomies, and why taxonomies do not make sense. Basically, this is what Thomas wrote. But the idea is that everybody mentioned it right now, which is if you're trying to normalize something, that needs to be a common thing to normalize it against. But this doesn't exist, because by design, as I mentioned first, for example, ETW, you can enrich it with some stuff, but another vendor might enrich it with another thing. And this disparity is inherently related to how sensors are developed. Like if you take, for example, ETW, you could ingest ETW and you might say, hey, a basic example would be like the registry, I believe it's called Windows kernel registry. Yeah, the ETW for Windows kernel registry. If you look at it, you might think that it gives you keys, but it doesn't give you anything. It gives you handles to keys, and you need to resolve that. Okay, so like it's basically a useless like ETW, but and it's delayed and it's some stuff to that. But just imagine you're trying to solve this. What you're gonna do? Like someone might say, oh, I might add the full key as a field, and I will split it again, like do the hive and the value separately. But another person would say, maybe not. Maybe I'll just put everything as a single string, and that would be the enrichment that I add. But adding those will create this disparity. And in Sigma, sometimes like what we noticed is a lot of people might want to take Sigma and convert it directly, which goes against the grain. But this prevented us sometimes from adding like rules that use extra fields. Like I believe there was a comment from somebody in Elastic saying, hey, I submitted an ETW 2 years ago, pull request, and it got closed. Yeah, sorry about that. But the point is that if we put up the ETW events in Sigma and everybody start ingesting it, for example, nobody will know how, can't even use it, because you're not even aware that your EDR isn't ingesting it. Because at the end of the day, all this sensor talk is directly correlated or related to your sensor. It doesn't matter if you use Splunk, it's a done deal. Like you're using what Splunk is giving you. If you're choosing to another vendor, that's for example why the discussion around KQL, like my KQL, my Sentinel support correlation, and it does graph API and blah blah blah, all that good stuff. But the point is, let's say your company, for example, switches your Sentinel. What happens to your detection? Do they work? No. The answer is no, of course. And you're screwed. That's the answer. Okay. No need to answer anything. But it's a very interesting point, because on paper, as Jose said, on paper it sounds very good, and there is potential that it might work because you're hyped. Oh, maybe I'm onto something. But in reality, it's I don't think it's.
I have one caveat. It will work. It does work with a bunch of PS money. Right, like a bunch of professional service funds. Like, yeah, you can migrate all that. No worries, right? It's a challenge. Like this is a hard problem in our industry. I don't think that like again, and I can tell you from history with Splunk, like we try like Splunk's business worked with customers to try to have them, like vendors, right, normalize their data, have a standard. That's how the whole SIM data model thing came about, right? And the end result of that, if you look at some, I mean, like as things matured, like Splunk then took over and said, hey, we're just going to support like key data models we care about. But what ended up happening in the in between was a lot of vendors just mapped however they thought best, and even sometimes data models, depending on like what vendor's sending you the events, it's exactly what you're saying now. It's like sometimes the data doesn't match up, right? Like again, there's an endpoint process data model, for example, right? And if you're sending across strike data to Splunk, or you're sending Sysmon or Windows Defender, you may end up with different fields in the command field in the data model, right? Like it could be double slashed, for example, like by escaping things, or spacing could be like escaped out. It depends on what that downstream vendor is doing. And it is what it is. Like you can add more listen, you can definitely, as a vendor, right? Like we can add validation to those fields. We can really, take control over the data parsing and parse everything. But it's such a lift that I think my argument is always, you know what? Just build more detections. Like build a detection per data source. Let the vendor do what they're going to do, and then you write vendor-specific detections. The other issue I've seen it crop up over the years for us is when you ship a detection against a data model, a bunch of assumptions get made by the customer. Like I see you laughing, Jamie. I'm assuming, like, you know where I'm going with this, right? Like recently, and I'm again can't name names or anything, but recently we had a huge. It was good feedback, negative feedback. Hey, you guys, this is broken. This is not good. But I think it was really, Mike and I talked a bunch afterwards. I think it ended up being exactly this problem. Like it just showed up ahead. The issue they were complaining about was a symptom of this problem. And so the complaint was, we ship detections against a CVE. It was against the web data model, right? So data model normalizes web data from different web data sources. And the complaint was like, well, the detections you shipped require us to decrypt traffic, which is not a usual architectural thing that most businesses do, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, true. If you're using, again, Zscaler, Palo Alto, you probably won't be decrypting the traffic you're proxying, right? But if you're using a reverse proxy like Nginx and you can log it, you could break connections and decrypt traffic and log what you need for detections. Now, how many people are doing this? Very few, I'm sure, right? But it's still a very valid way to detect things if there's an environment that allows for that, right? The whole key problem there was that the customer spent a ton of time trying to figure out how to implement this detection until they realized they couldn't. And I think they spent a ton of time because if you would have just built a detection against Nginx, right, which was the original data source, they would have been like, oh, got it. I don't have that data source. I'm not even going to bother. Moving on, right? But because we built it against a web data model and they do populate web data, right? They tried, hey, this is not working. I'm not getting any hits. What's going on? Escalated, right? So that's the other half of the coin too. Like, I mean, this issue has two faces. One face is normalizing just doesn't work. Like it just doesn't work. And again, the juice is not worth the squeeze. You're better off hiring more detection engineers and scaling that part out, right? Two, not only is the juice not worth the squeeze, it obfuscates the actual source some of the stuff is coming from, and it just makes, I think, again, if you're now sometimes customers have to reverse your query back to their own data sources. Like, why? Just ship it to them in the format that they're going to be collecting this data on, right? And this problem gets even worse.
I got to say something
before
you go too far. So this is the hard part about the data models too. And I have a pro and a con for data models for like Splunk data models and stuff, but like. The hard part is like Ivanti could come up with a TA that does not map their stuff to SIM. So therefore it's not mapped to the web data model. And they're just direct data, right? And so there's a reliance on vendors to do it or someone to create that tagging to map it to the web data model. Where like using the Nginx data like we did, it was very much it's mapped to the web data model. It's a piece of cake. Like you're catching any web data or you're properly using Nginx or whatever, like it should just go. I have no idea for these appliances, right? So it's so hard because you just don't know like where this is going to be, whether even logging it as well. Like how many customers are truly logging a lot of these things to begin with.
And again, bringing this a layer down even more, like inception on this problem is, we haven't even talked about the fact that a lot of data sources are configurable. Sysmon is a perfect example. So like what you're collecting in Sysmon in one organization is not the same as another. And most vendors don't ship the configuration you need for the data source and how to collect it. Right? Like, yep. And so either way, that's a whole, again, another layer of complexity here. Is like, hey, how do you configure Avanti to get these logs exactly that we need for this, analytics engine, right?
this is basically where we're at with this, right? Like we're getting down there into the
We're way down there.
I just want to point out, I think it's ironic and also amazing that we came here to talk about data source diversity, and we just basically went into a rant about how much we hate diversity in data sources. Like, you know, we want a monopoly and like full symmetry on everything, but
but it's needed. There is no way around it, because if you leave it, for example, as we currently leaving it to the other side, which is the developer, it will always be incomplete, because how do you say, everyone is sourced in a way, like some people have 20,000 developers, others have 20. Some people have geniuses, others do not. Some people think ahead, some people think 1 year in advance, blah, 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 blah. So like if you take, how do you say, a common log format, it doesn't exist. And it's a problem, but we're not addressing it. But if you didn't address it there, then it's trickled down to us when you try to ingest it, and it becomes a bleep show.
And the other side of that is like adversaries are doing the exact same thing. Exactly what you said is like, hey, even the most mature, sophisticated defensive environment, I know where your skeletons are. Like I know what your weird appliances that maybe either don't have logs or have weirdly formatted logs, even down to like Linux. They're like, hey, cool, like I know that stuff exists, but you're not parsing that. Like even though your mean time to detection and response is so slow on like anything on the edge, all these appliances, like you can run full campaigns just kind of on the periphery of where you think you can detect.
And this is part of the problem with like our data model, for instance. And so like in my Nginx environment, I'm like, give me everything, right? Well, data models only map so much. It doesn't map everything. And this goes for all of the data models. And most organizations who probably do some level of normalization are skipping some amount of data, right? And so, for instance, Jose's like, oh yeah, because you got the request body in there. And I'm like, no, the data model doesn't take the request body. I log it because I want everything, you know, like hack naked, right? Like that's why I have a naked sysmon config. I'm like, I just want all the data. I don't want to be logged out.
You're not the norm, Mike.
I can see you like looking at that code. I can see you just like hitting the git push and just like a tear running down your eye. Like I hate myself so much for writing this, but it's thus is the world.
I just want my data.
Yeah, you're the Rosetta Stone of content.
Yeah, but the point is that how do you say, people are cheated into believing that there is a solution. That's why you need to be aware of the existence of these different log sources, and they are different and they provide different level of information, and you need to be aware of what you're collecting. For example, in a single org, you could have a config that's 1 year old of sysmon here, and we updated it, but we forgot to deploy it there, and then suddenly you have disparity in logging that you're not even aware of, and let alone that 7 machines have this version of antivirus that's not even working sometimes, and they're sending half the data and it's on the machine, and etc. And when you're doing detection, sometimes, how do you say, for example, as Mike said, we all have that naked sysmon, thanks to Mike, which is, oh wow, I have process access, oh wow, I can do this and all this beautiful stuff. Okay, I have a working detection. Boom, you deploy it, 0. Why? We forgot to ship the log source. No. It's already against you, like, meaning from our side, when you build the detection, especially like in the vendor side, you need to take all of this into consideration before building, because the customer is so how do you say, the inverse of homogeneous? Non-homogeneous, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, non-homogeneous, it's crazy.
And I think the other big thing too, especially, I've never been on the vendor product side, obviously, but like, how do you calculate those trade-offs of like, hey, we can do, you know, security, and we looking at this, we can do the top half of that for 30, 90 days at a time, recognizing that like, hey, just the old adage of like firing an alert if no one like triage it and responds doesn't matter. Like it's tree fall in the woods kind of paradigm. First, if we want to do all 5 of these, you might have the last 72 hours at any given point. And like, are we just going to, you know, build a product that fires alerts that no one looks at and just kind of screaming perpetually of like, hey, we're getting hacked, and no one's listening? So it's like, and I think just kind of thinking like a thought experiment, like I agree with what you said, like we can't trick people into like deceive them and that there is a better solution, but like in the back of our brain, like what would the better solution even look like? Like I know we're talking about like this like uniform, just like very clean, like everyone's talking about the same thing. I think we can almost strike that out of reality. Like, that's even in every other situation we've ever tried to do that, whether it's a government system attack, whatever, like it fails. Like I can't even conceptualize what a better process would look like. So it just seems like you just kind of have to like, tighten your, tie your shoes and just like, hey, we're just going to deal with it. But that just also feels like unsatisfactory, as you said.
Yeah, it is. I don't know.
I was just thinking from like an IR perspective, like, because I remember with like Mandiant, they have like tons of stuff about like, oh, like just log everything to some place and we'll take it from there. They don't care about normalization, right? Like it's just, we'll just go grep it. We're good, and you're going to pay for it. But as long as you got your data somewhere, we'll just take care of it from there. And there's no normalization happening, and this is
paying for that storage. Yeah, that's crazy.
This is my plug for SIG converter, because you can go there at any time, convert your rule to whatever kind of format, and you're good to go. Just kidding.
Yeah, but technically speaking, with the Pi Sigma idea, it tries to solve this. Of course, it's not perfect, but the pipelining idea between your Sigma and the output, and you can modify by providing different pipelines. If you read people output from this, of course, they face problems, and it's not as easy as it's in theory. But quote unquote, it is kind of like a workaround to this problem, because you choose the log source, you are at least aware, like similar to how attack is providing now data sources with sub-techniques and techniques and making people aware with submitting the pyramid and all of that good stuff. And the idea behind it is that now people are aware that data sources exist. And instead of like, hey, my CM detection output, you see this, my CM detection, that it's actually very, very deep, and people need to understand it. And you need to be like how do you say, comfortable with accepting sometimes you don't have the data, and you need to find workaround around that idea.
Yeah. I think I really like what you're saying too, and like the way I translate that in my head is like it's almost revisiting what we used to see from like NIST of like, hey, here's like basically like standards of like, hey, rather than trying to standardize the implementation, why don't we standardize, like, I'm going to steal some DHS, sorry, branding, if they're listening, like secure by default. Like, hey, if you have a Windows host, here's the data that you need. Like you need process, you need file, it needs to have these variables. And like implementation is kind of a dealer's choice. Here's some recommendations. You can do it this way, this way, this way, this way. But like, I think like the big point would be like, thou shalt not have a Windows host in an environment that does not do X, Y, Z, or like pick your favorite compliance, like you goofed.
But Jamie, the problem is that my 4104 logs have passwords in them, and I can't log that. I'm sorry. Like across the board, every endpoint, everyone has a password, right? Like that's gonna have to be wiped away. And if you're gonna collect it as an EDR product, I'm sorry, we have to turn it off.
Good God. Like those would be the moments where I'm like, I wish I didn't have my camera on for this call. Like I don't have the words. It's all gonna come out of my face, but I can't respond. I'm going nonverbal, but deep existential dread.
We need the premium version of Atomic on a Friday where we can rant.
Yes.
and people see us like rage.
Yeah. What's that, like, what are those rooms where you can just go into like old dishes and stuff and just break a bunch of stuff, like therapy violence or whatever?
Yeah. These dressing rooms or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, look, at least we're having the conversation. I think that our industry doesn't talk too much about this openly. Like we all kind of swallow the issues. We're dealing with it a bunch of hours in the day, but my entire argument here is like, I'd rather us be spending time on actually writing more detections and forget the whole data normalization issue. Like the data's there, like you have data sources, let's just write detection against them. Like, and if you have to write 3 for the same, for like different EDRs for the same query, let it be. Right? I don't know. I think that the whole normalizing process, there's so many standards at this point. Actually, and it reminds me, Jamie, I was going to ask you, like, I was so excited or I remember MITRE, when MITRE announced the attack data source objects, and man, I was so excited for that. I'm like, oh, this is it. Like, I mean, they're gonna, like this is gonna do what attack did to like mapping back attacks, mapping back data sources. And that, I don't know what's happened. Anyway, I was excited about it. I don't think that solved it. I don't think really any of the efforts we put out either have dinged it. And it feels like, at least on the analytics side, every vendor doing their own thing, which is, it's okay. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, if it works for the customers, it works for the customers, right? But as an industry, we still got the problem. Like,
I 100% agree. And I think like we had the same opinion. We're like, oh, we're going to standardize a bunch of stuff. And then like generally like in my head, the like meme I'm thinking of is like you walk and you're like super confident. And there's that like line in the sand where it's like, past this point, it depends. And you slowly start slowing down and you're like, oh, like I'm going to put my foot in my mouth if I run through this line and start like screaming like, this is the way to do cyber. And you're like, so like, I think that's the trouble. And especially exactly to your first point, like that's like, I agree. Like we need to have these conversations, but like, that's the funny thing. Like every time I go to a conference or I watch like a webinar or like read a blog, I'm like, oh, this is good, like stuff, whatever. I agree. But I'm like, I feel like we're just talking to each other. Like we're like I went into this, like I understood this problem, like I learned some stuff, but like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like, how do we get that bubble of like us talking to each other, like more inclusive to like, okay, cool. Like exactly you said, hey, we're going to just embrace writing detections on every data source for everything we've ever seen. How do we get, not only make that more understood and more recognized, but also like justify that? Because like if I'm not a cyber person, I'm like, hey, I'm a small business, and I'm like, hey, why does it cost so much to do detection? Like I eventually was like, hey, this is a cost center, I'm good. Like ransomware be damned, I'll just like kind of roll the dice, and like if it hits, whatever. Like I need to keep bread on the table, and I'm selling sandwiches. Why are you talking to me about like ETW versus this? Like this is I'm a mayonnaise dude. Like, what are we talking about?
All right. Well, I'm going to start wrapping it. So,
strange note to end on. I'm a mayonnaise. Yeah.
I know. Like, okay. All right. All right. We're going to start with 1 minute. I'll find a counter thing. We'll do 1 minute hot takes. Solution, drop a solution, drop the final thoughts. Let me find like a timer. Stand by. We get it. All right, who's gonna go first? We'll start with do you want to go, Naz? You want to go first? Co-host number 3.
Well, what was the question?
Last minute. You got 1 minute to drop a hot take or
any hot take.
Or any hot take, any spice, last minute conversation piece, and then we'll just go down the list. We'll start with Naz. Ready?
Okay. Let me try. But I will just add to this, but in a more serious way, which could be a hot take. But I don't think we're close to solving the problem because we're thinking in vendor specific. And many people, like when you see them, a lot of people. This is what I hate: is that a lot of people think in their work. Of course, they have the right to do that because you're working with a product. But when you start thinking about detection in product wise, you're limiting yourself of what detection actually is. Like people working with Sentinel right now for the last 5 years, oh, happy for you. But when you switch to another vendor or another company that's using McAfee, what you're gonna do next? Like what your understanding of detection is like solely reliant on the technology provided by the vendor, but it should be in the other side. But as Jamie said, we're not even talking about it. But there is no incentive to talk about it because everyone is selling something to make detections. We're not creating detection out of thin air. There are some initiatives out there to create like open source detection and whatever. But the idea is open source detection will never work because every environment is different. But on the other hand, the vendor aren't incentivized to even bring this up because everyone is wanting you to think that, hey, we have the best thing, we have the best. And from a development perspective, it makes sense because when you're limited with I know I surpassed 1 minute, but sorry. When you're limited, sorry, this is the privilege of being a third co-host. But yeah, I'm taking false time. Yeah, but the point is, if you nice. if you're limited by this idea of vendor and you're not thinking in detections in abstract form, which is the log source, like the original thing, like, yeah, we will not advance. Like, this is like a rolling discussion. Every CVE from an appliance, every log missing, every enrichment missing, blah, 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 blah. My product solve it by 17, others do not. Happy life. Anyway.
All right, Jamie, you want to head next?
Yeah, start me off. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, so this is something I got in an argument at work about recently, but I think we're too smart for our own good. We chase new innovation, we're creating new products, we're looking for the next new thing, and exactly like Niall said, like, I think one of the funny things about like security in general is we don't actually solve anything. Like, look back in like the last, since the dawn of cyber, like, what have we actually fixed and resolved? It's really, we've just figured out like either how to like push it down, or we've like, oh, like exactly like every product and every project we have is like, oh, this kind of solves it, but like not really, but like it's good. It's a net positive, but like we're just pushing so many things under the rug. So like my hot take would be like, I wish as an industry we would just like freeze and say, let's go back and like actually try to solve some of the fundamental things before we look for the next big hotness, shiny object in the sky. And I see the second to Jose.
Perfect. Oh, that's bad. But I'll channel Justin Elzy.
Yeah.
I'll channel him
Yes.
that I'm thinking right now. I remembered his tweet when he said, people say that detection did not improve. And then he said, like, go open up like any EDR and try to run Mimikatz or something, or like Windows defaults. He's right. So I just channeled him because I imagined him seeing this take and responding in his head. Okay, never mind. But it's a very good take. Yeah, okay.
All right, Jose. Ready? Are you mic'd? Is he there? I think you're muted.
You're muted, but you're not muted.
Maybe you're muted?
Oh, I thought he was getting in like real deep.
I know. I was like, well, this is serious.
Oh, wow, this is going to be.
No, we can't hear you, Jose.
It was so good that StreamYard kicked them out.
Someone from Splunk just
to respond in spirit to Justin though.
How about
like,
that?
Yes.
You blocked
better.
Mimikatz in certain environments, but like if I Google right now 2024 CTI Mimikatz, is it still going to show up in reports? Yes. You have not scaled said solution, thus you have not solved. You've solved something, but not everything.
Yep.
All right. I think I got it working. Sorry about that.
Okay,
I don't know what happened.
you're good. You're
You're
live.
good.
I hot take, that 1 minute hot take, go. I think where there are problems, business cat opinion here, right? Where there are problems, there's always market opportunities. And I think, hot take, I think that we will see platforms. Actually, we are seeing platforms right now in the market trying to solve different aspects of this problem. Like, again, Snap Attack, Anvologic, Cardinal Ops, Impede, right? I'm calling them detection platforms. And they're all approaching it from very different angles, which is kind of interesting. But they all are like one of the core problems of detection, having detections at scale and, platform for it is dealing with this problem, right? Normalizing data, building queries that you can run out of the box, right? And I think that you'll see, like a Gartner quadrant of this, 2-3 years from now. And a few of these vendors are gonna really put something awesome out there, and ideally IPO, and then a few others won't. Time. Hot take.
That's a very good take. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it was like what capitalism eventually will consume.
Capitalism is what was that the old saying? There's only one constant, that's change. And in this case, with markets, we're in a market. There's only one constant. There's an opportunity. There's an issue. There's going to be an opportunity. People are going to freaking make money off of this. I promise you.
Yep.
Maybe not today, but they will.
So, Mike, your hot take. What is your hot take?
Go, Mike. Go. 1 minute.
Oh my gosh. I should have planned something.
Let me bring it on.
You need drums?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm so neutral on kind of this because I had a good experience in the past with normalization from a vendor perspective, and I saw from like, and I mean I guess it was mixed though too. Like we standardized all EDR, so it was easy. So we standardized the data, we normalized it into a place where it wasn't too much work to bring in a new EDR and just normalize it the same. But the caveat was, which is what we kind of were talking about here today, was when we brought in, say, Paolo's EDR, whatever it's called, when we brought that in, it didn't
Cortex.
map. Yeah, Cortex, yes. It doesn't map. I got the shirt on. I can't even. Sorry, Paul. It didn't map. It didn't map 1-to-1 with everything else. Or MDE. MDE doesn't map 1-to-1 with all the fields from, say, like carbon black response back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to modify our engine to accept certain things or map certain things. We'd force mapping things to these new fields, our normalized fields, in hopes that it was good enough. But that problem is if you went into the product, say Cortex or MDE, you would see all this rich data, and it would just be like, wow, like, why are we not normalizing that? Like, we could write content for LDAP queries, or we could write content for auth failures from CrowdStrike and all these things, but we didn't normalize it, all of it. So I don't know. It's not a hot take. It's more, I guess, just a story of something.
That's a sticker in itself. This is not a hot take crossed out story. Love it.
Some normalization being decent, but also, when you do normalize, I guess you lose things still. And I think that's across the board for most orgs who do it.
Yes, yes.
You should join us in Hell Divers and spread democracy.
Only normalization we need, right?
Oh my gosh. Only normalization you need today.
Yeah. I need to figure that out. Thank you all for joining. On behalf of the co-host team being here. But yeah, appreciate it. This was awesome. Good kickoff to Purple Madness. Next week we will have Nas again. So we'll see you. We'll see you again.
Yes.
And then after that, just kind of go on with Harrison. Yeah, we actually, which is crazy. It's Atomics on a Friday is just booking up. We already got April like halfway booked, which is wild. That doesn't make any sense. So
what's time anymore?
I know. Yeah. So we're gonna have. I'm pretty sure it's still a yes, but Ben from Trust and Sec to come show off Impede live, which that just recently consumed all of Atomic and all those other cool things. And then I have something really cool. There's a lot of content out there on resumes and recruiting and trying to get a job and cyber or IT. I know a guy who got me my first job when I was I think I was 18 when he recruited me for some little shop. He's still recruiting to this day. So I actually convinced him to come on the show and give us the dirty secrets of recruiters. So nice. I'm excited about that. That'll be a fun one. That's in April. But let's get through March. We got a lot going on this month. So, But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for all the conversation and hot takes.
Thanks.
What was the quote? What's the quote of the day? Not worth the squeeze. What was it?
The juice is not worth the squeeze.
Juice is not worth the squeeze. Yes.
Obviously, never said about mango or orange juice, but those are totally worth the squeeze. Happy Friday.
Yes.
Very much already. Can't believe
Happy
it.
Friday. I know. It's wild.
Thanks.
Happy Friday.
We'll see you guys. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah,
actually end the stream.